Our next speaker started out life in rural upstate Michigan. His early education was accomplished mainly in a one-room schoolhouse with a grand total of 8 students. The teacher was his aunt. 3 of the other pupils were his cousins. He said it wasn't exactly homeschooling, but it was darn close. Wanderlust got the best of him. He headed for Southern California, where he spent years as a mechanical designer. Like many JBS members, the veteran variety, he came into contact with the society during the 1964 presidential election. He decided to investigate the society on his own and soon joined, became a chapter leader and a section leader. 25 years ago, he accepted a staff position, first as a coordinator and then one of our top executives in the California branch office. We brought him to Appleton. For the past decade, he's been the national director of TRIM, the organization that big spending members of Congress love to hate. Under his capable leadership, TRIM blossomed into national stature when in 1991, TRIM bulletins became available for all 435 congressional districts. Quite an accomplishment. His name doesn't appear on all those TRIM bulletins, which I guess is a wise decision. There are numerous House members who would love to meet him, I think. But his name does appear in his frequently witty, sparkling entry in each month's JBS bulletin. He's widely respected for his intense awareness of both the worth of the U.S. Constitution, the workings of Congress. But he's here tonight to tell us it's a great time to be a Bircher. Mr. Jim Toft.
Good evening, everybody. What an occasion. 40 years. 4 decades, or, as Abe Lincoln would say, 2 score. Can you believe it? Could this be the same organization that I've repeatedly heard over the years was dead and gone? Well, for dead folks, you sound pretty lively tonight. And what a great personal honor it is for me to be here at the head table with some of the men who were instrumental in building the solid foundation of the society, a foundation from which we are now poised to leap forward and carry Mr. Welch's vision into a brand new century. Clyde Lewis, Dr. Adamson, General Gatsis, we could devote the whole program tonight to an inspiring account of any one of almost 36 men here on the dais. And then we'd only begin to tell their story. And what a wonderful crop of new members on our National Council. We're also privileged to have with us on this historic occasion the hard-working men who comprise our field staff, the coordinators, the major coordinators, and the development officers. I served briefly in the field as a coordinator in the early 1970s, and I can tell you that when I was reassigned to office duty, I felt like I was going on vacation. Some say I've been on vacation ever since. It is this national staff that sets the John Birch Society apart from so many mailing list conservative organizations. There are also several former members of the field staff here tonight, and I'd like to ask all these men, current and former, to please stand and be recognized. They're a terrific bunch, although a couple of them are just kids. But they're good-looking kids. There is another, perhaps even more dedicated group with us tonight. They are the wives of our field staff. They are the ones who must keep the home fires burning while their husbands travel day and night to carry out their many responsibilities. Without their help and without their support, the John Birch Society would be hard-pressed to sustain a staff presence across this great land. May I also ask you wonderful ladies to stand so that we can acknowledge you and your very important contribution to our crusade. They're a lot better looking than that first group, too. When I finally got smart enough to join the John Birch Society late in 1964, when I finally realized that just scanning the front page and the sports page of my newspaper and watching Hutley and Brinkley on the evening news might possibly be leaving a few gaps in my understanding of what was going on in this world, then I was filled with a fit of regret. Why couldn't I have been there at that founding meeting in Indianapolis in 1958? I'd have been more than happy to just slink around refilling the coffee cups and sitting in a dark corner at that historic meeting. But I was even dumber back then, and now it was already 1964. I had missed out on the first 6 years of the John Birch Society. And now, almost 34 years later, I've mellowed a bit. Just a bit. I wish I could have been at Indianapolis, though. But the calendar says that I've been hanging around the JBS as a member for 85% of its history. If you'll look around you tonight at the caliber of people that we have in this organization, you'll know why I am such a fan. Not just the head table, but earlier I was commenting, made a reference to a great Bircher, and I decided that term was redundant because Birchers are great. As the National Director of TRIM, I try to keep an eye out for examples of excessive government spending. And just this month, just less than 2 weeks ago, the news wires were reporting that in the next year, the Pentagon will spend over $50 million for the impetus drug Viagra. This is apparently the Clinton administration response to our complaints about a lack of military readiness. You know, becoming a Bircher is the beginning of developing lifetime friendships. And one of mine is here tonight, all the way from the Seattle area, Al Butterworth. Al, where are you? You got that applause, Al, because you're a friend of mine. Al and I were chapter leaders in the late 1960s in Orange County, California. He moved to the state of Washington a few years later, even did a stint in Europe for his employer, the Federal Aviation Administration, but we've stayed in touch over the years. Now, I last saw Al 15 years ago at our 25th anniversary, our shindig in Indianapolis. And for some reason, he's getting a little old. Al brings back memories of those early Birch days. The annual July 4th parade in Huntington Beach, California was, back then, and it may still be, the biggest Independence Day parade west of the Mississippi, with several 100,000 spectators lining its 5-mile route. When the JBS sought to enter a float in 1966, it was denied entry, creating a big local controversy. By 1967, parade officials relented, and local Birchers entered a float that was very well received. But in 1968, area JBS Birchers went all out. The no-win war in Vietnam was raging, and Birchers were busy petitioning Congress to stop the immoral aid and trade that was subsidizing the killers of American troops. And so the John Birch Society entry in the July 4th parade that year featured 1,400 marching men and women each clad in white shirts or blouses and dark slacks and skirts. Each marcher carried a black ribboned wreath and a placard with the name of a Californian who had been killed in Vietnam. Led by a drummer sounding a slow, steady beat, the dramatic impact brought many onlookers to tears. One professional broadcaster, attempting to describe the scene, broke down and was unable to continue. 3 JBS floats followed the marchers, all supporting our troops and proclaiming that we must win in Vietnam and then get out. Area liberals were driven to fits. For months they wrote each other in the letters to the editor column, trying to give reassurance that this Birch production was just some apparition and that the public's positive response was not as overwhelming as it indeed was. We had brought a powerful message to hundreds of thousands of people, plus drove the liberals nuts. That was a great time to be a Bircher. By 1978, I had been on the staff of the Society for 6 years, but it took our battle to stop the giveaway of our Panama Canal to finally make me realize that what we were doing as Birchers could literally change the history books. I found myself in a situation during the crucial final U.S. Senate debates where I was responsible for tracking down every last Bircher in several western states to be sure they were bringing their influence to bear on their U.S. senators on the canal issue. The JBS was a major force in that struggle, but we lost by 1 vote in the Senate. A few months later, however, 7 of the 14 senators up for re-election who had supported the canal giveaway were tossed out of office by an awakened electorate. Even in losing, our educational approach had gained ground. Those 1970s were a great time to be a Bircher. In the early 80s, I began to work with my trim committee in the San Gabriel Valley in Southern California. And my favorite memory of those times was distributing trim bulletins at a town meeting of our local big-spending liberal congressman. I arrived early, decked out in my Sunday go-to-meeting suit, and positioned myself outside the main door. As each constituent arrived, I greeted them, gave them the congressman's trim bulletin. Everyone seemed to assume that I was part of his staff. After they glanced at his 8 votes for high taxes and big government, they were dumbfounded as to why we would be publicizing such a voting record. 10 minutes later, a real staff assistant appeared and through clenched teeth requested a bulletin. Just before the meeting got underway, I went inside and I found an audience intently studying their trim bulletins. And I saw a congressman glumly approaching the podium, looking like he would rather be somewhere else. In the years since, I've heard many similar stories from other trimmers having lots of fun at their congressman's town meeting. The 1980s was a great time to be a Bircher. Here in the 90s, we've seen the New American magazine just take off like a rocket. I maintain, for the record, that it was purely coincidental that the takeoff started right after I gave up my duties as circulation manager. Special issues of the magazine now total in the millions, and its influence directly on subscribers and via the internet and indirectly through media opinion molders continues to climb. In recent years, the JBS won an impressive victory in the battle to prevent a Constitution-threatening conference of the states, and our members were instrumental in crippling the insiders' push for term limits. Less than a year ago, the John Birch Society was the only organization using the I word, impeachment. Now it's the lead item on the nightly news. If If Mr. Clinton's fingernails are eventually pried loose from his desk in the Oval Office, the office that he has so disgraced, you can be sure that you, through our action campaign, will have played no small part in greasing the skids. These 1990s have been a great time to be a Bircher. Now, it might seem that I'm saying that any time is a great time to be a Bircher. Let me make it clear. That is what I am saying. And those of you in our audience tonight who are not yet members of the John Birch Society, why let us have all the fun? The years that lie just ahead will be crucial ones for the survival of our republic and its Bill of Rights freedoms. And frankly, our only hope to meet those challenges lies in the arrival of reinforcements of thousands of additional good Americans like you. When you're ready to sign on the dotted line, we're ready to hand you a pen, and tonight is not too early. I look forward to seeing all of you, including Al, at our big 50th anniversary celebration just 10 years down the road. Where will it be held? Maybe back in our birthplace in Indianapolis. Maybe in the grand ballroom of that building on the East River in New York City, where the United Nations used to have their headquarters.
Yeah, let's dance.